I received review copies for several games on this list, so thanks to the publishers and distributors. It's top 10 of the year time, and once again, before we get into my favourite 10 games of 2023, I'm going to give you a quick rundown of my 10 favourite games of the previous 5 years, 2018 to 2022. Hopefully, it will give you a feel for my tastes and preferences and set the tone for my 2023 picks. So at number 10, we have 2018's Welcome To. I've dabbled with some of the sequels and variants, but it's the original we're talking about here, Your Perfect Home. Welcome To does everything right. It has a clever drafting system, a tiny bit of player interaction, variable scoring from game to game, and a lovely setting with fabulous graphic design. Number 9 is 2021's Zombie Teens Evolution. This is my favourite legacy experience so far. It's a cooperative game with a cute little emerging story about a team of teens and their dog fighting off zombies. There are an incredible number of new rules and modes of play to discover over the series of games, and it's endlessly replayable thereafter. The product design is immaculate, with great presentation, and it's an exemplar of diversity and inclusion to boot. At number 8, we have Pitch Out, an awesome little 2-player flicking game, also from 2021, and a really simple and accessible head-to-head with loads of special powers, a hugely underrated gem. It was distressing to see huge piles of Pitch Out at Essen Spiel in 2023 being sold off for €5 a piece, with punters walking on by unaware of what they were missing. A reminder that a fantastic game does not always equal a great commercial product. Number 7 is 2019's Undaunted Normandy. I don't play many war games, but this one really connected with me. I love the art style from Osprey, and the clever combination of deck building with tactical movement and attacks is just perfectly realised. Number 6 was my top game of 2021. A sequel to one of my favourite games, Dominant Species, the Marine Edition has a new twist on worker placement which totally changes the flow of the game, while retaining the cutthroat, strategic, totally engaging gameplay of the brilliant original. Number 5 is Libertalia, Winds of Galecrest, a 2022 remake of the role selection pirate game by Stonemaier Games. And the buzz for the game was somewhat dampened by a lot of squabbling over the altered art style, but ultimately the new edition looks fine. The gameplay is better than ever, with new card effects, variable scoring, and an improved system for breaking ties. Number 4 is the modern classic from 2018, Quacks of Quedlinburg. This bag-building push-your-luck game is full of variety, and it's a quick little burst of fun with loads of exciting moments. 2019's Cartographers takes the number 3 spot, a perfect combination of polyomino placement and flip and write gameplay. To my mind, this is the best of the roll and write genre, with incredible variety, a touch of interaction, and the opportunity to really personalise your player sheets to create beautiful maps. Number 2 is 2019's Isle of Cats, a card drafting polyomino game where you pack cats together in a ship-shaped grid. It's a perfect package, and one that my wife Iris and I come back to again and again. And my favourite game of the last 5 years is still 2018's Everdell, the super cute worker placement tableau building game set in a woodland community. But we're really here to talk about 2023. So in this video I'm going to tell you about my 10 favourite games of the year. I'm Adam Porter, I design games and I review them on this channel, usually with a heavy focus on product design. So if you like what I do, please share the video, comment and subscribe. And of course, the greatest game of 2023 was the cute little trick-taking game for young children, Zingazam from Brain Games. But sadly, that one's disqualified due to my own bias as the game's designer. I promise you it is objectively the best game of the year, but alas, it doesn't make the list. The usual ground rules apply to my top 10 of the year. Firstly, I tend towards short, simple experiences, so there's not many heavy, high fantasy epics on here. Secondly, I don't worry too much about release dates. If the game became available to me in 2022 or 2023 because it was released at Essen Spiel or distributed in the UK for the first time or remade from an older title, then it's eligible. And finally, and most importantly, I didn't play all that many new games in 2023, so there are inevitably many wonderful games missing from this list. This top 10 is simply 10 games which I can wholeheartedly recommend. In Silver and Gold Pyramids, each player fills out 2 grids on pyramid cards by crossing out the boxes, in an effort to move from the entrance to the Golden Tomb. Each turn, an expedition card is revealed with a polyomino shape showing on it. All players must cross off boxes in that pattern on one of their cards. Covering icons along the way gives players various rewards, crossing off bonus spaces, scoring points for red or green gems, losing points for skulls, cancelling skulls with potions, and trying to gather one torch per round. When a pyramid card is completed, you select a new one from the display. And after 4 times through the expedition deck, players score points for completed cards, with bonuses for matching coloured pairs, and points from red and green gems are added to make a final score. The highest scorer wins. Silver and Gold was an unassuming little title which appeared in NSV's catalogue back in 2019 from prolific designer Phil Walker Harding. Now, Phil's approach to design closely mirrors my own. Accessibility is his absolute focus, and he achieves it more effectively than anyone else in the business. Silver and Gold's innovation was the use of dry wipe cards. This was a novel twist on roll and write or flip and write games of the time. Of course, later games like Rolling Realms have adopted a similar approach, but I still remember Silver and Gold very fondly, so I was delighted to hear of a sequel. The Pyramids edition avoids the trap of added complexity. If anything, this edition is simpler than the earlier game. Fewer rules, more intuitive, and just as fun. In Savernake Forest, players each form a grid of cards trying to create paths which connect woodland creatures to their preferred food. On your turn, you simply select one of the cards from the table, but you also gain a bonus depending on the card's location in the display. If the card is taken from the first slot, you'll be starting player next round. If it comes from the second slot, you take a water token, which increases the points value of one food source for one of your animals. If it comes from the third slot, you'll also gain a lair token, which increases the storage capacity of one of your other cards. And the cards in the fourth slot are all animals to add to your display. The game ends when everyone completes their 4x4 grid, then each animal scores points for the various foods in the same path, and the highest scorer wins. The real Savernake Forest is located just 20 miles from Wantage, the small market town where I grew up, and I can assure you, there aren't many armadillos or beavers pottering about. This one is unlikely to garner much attention. It's a really cute setting and a clever drafting system, but nothing really stands out about the game. It's just a solid little product. It would be nice to see it nominated for an award or two to raise its profile. I think families are likely to get a lot out of Savernake Forest. In Beaver Creek, players take turns to roll 2 dice which determine which pieces they need to place on the dam, and how they should place them. One of the dice determines how many logs you place and how many beavers. The other die might require you to only use your pinky fingers, or to use your fingers like scissors, or to use your non-dominant hand, or to place the log and beaver together in a single move. And if pieces collapse on your turn, all other players discard 1 log, bringing them closer to a win. But the game continues on the increasingly unsteady construction, and when one player runs out of logs, they're declared the winner of the game. With Savernake Forest and now this, 2023 is clearly the year of the beaver. Beaver Creek is a very familiar concept. Stack planks and supporting pieces while trying not to let the structure fall. We've seen this in Rhino Hero, Tokyo Highway, Junk Art, Men at Work, Animal Upon Animal, and many others. The dice roll offers you some sort of constraint on how you can place the pieces, but the limitations are not too challenging, and again, it all feels familiar. The most notable feature of the game is its box size and price point. Beaver Creek offers up an experience to rival those other titles with a much smaller footprint. It's very cute too, and always hilarious. In the fox experiment, players are Russian scientists breeding foxes in an effort to create increasingly domesticated creatures over successive generations. The real-life experiment took place in the 1950s and increases our understanding of Mendelian genetics. Each round starts with players taking 3 actions, selecting a female fox, a male fox, and some supplies, which also determines turn order for the next round. Your chosen foxes each have potential traits represented by coloured dice. During the breeding phase, players all roll their dice and line them up to create traits, which they mark off on blank cards to create pups. Green dice and tokens are wild. You then score your pups for friendliness based on the number of traits that they have, and optionally you can name your pup, although this has no impact on gameplay. Players now compare their pups to study cards in front of them, and these have certain objectives that you need to achieve, essentially creating pups with specific traits: waggy tails, floppy ears, spotty fur, and barking like a pet dog. Completed objectives earn points at the end of the game, and they each feature 3 levels, so you can score the same objective several times, but it becomes more challenging and rewarding each time. Each pup that you created generates trait tokens, and these are used to upgrade your player board, giving you special abilities and allowing you to break the rules in various ways. All new pups created in a round are then placed into the central display for players to select from as parents in the next round, and players gain awards for adding the friendliest fox to the gene pool. After 5 rounds, points are added up and the highest scorer wins. Now, I found this game fascinating. Perhaps more fascinating than fun. But I do like games which buck the trend and carve their own path. Designer of Wingspan, Elizabeth Hargrave, has partnered with co-designer Jeff Fraser to bring us this exploration of an apparently famous Russian experiment which I previously knew nothing about. And that, I think, is where the game's real value lies. I was intrigued by the premise, played the game, and immediately started reading articles about the real experiment. The online response to the subject matter has been mixed. Perhaps inevitably, some find it distasteful and feel it shouldn't have been made, but I found it thought-provoking and informative, highlighting a moment in history that I was totally unaware of, and simulating the process cleverly, with all the abstractions that the board game medium inevitably brings. The mix of dice drafting, set collection and contracts makes for a pretty solid little game, though the requirement for a third automated opponent in the 2-player game was disappointing. Dawn of Ulos is a light to medium complexity economic game for 1 to 5 players from first-time board game designer Jason Lentz. Players attempt to earn the most favour, the currency of the game. And on your turn you place a tile, often strengthening one of the factions indicated on the board by these little plastic markers. No one owns these factions, but on your turn you can use favour to purchase cards corresponding to each of them. Alternatively, you can return a card to the supply, gaining favour according to the current position of the faction marker on the track, and using the faction's power. There are all manner of chaotic effects on offer here, so move a tile to a new position, reveal cards from another player's hand and claim rewards, or draw and place an extra tile. Connecting a territory to a purple rift tile awards a player with a single-use ability that they can utilise on a later turn. Placing a tile such that 2 territories are joined up brings about a conflict, and all players simultaneously reveal cards from their hands to bolster their chosen faction's strengths, and the losing faction is kicked off the board, reducing the value of all corresponding cards in players' hands. Cards used in the conflict earn the players spoils, additional favour tokens equal to their current position on the track. So the various territories expand across the map as the game progresses, with players aiming to purchase cards when they're cheap and discard them for their effects when they're at the height of their power. At the end of the game, all cards remaining in hand are awarded favour equal to the corresponding faction's strength, and the player with the most favour wins. There are 10 factions in the box, each with a different power, and only 5 are used in each game, giving a good amount of variety between sessions. So on paper, Dawn of Ulos is right up my street, a fairly light stock market game. I love Haben Gut, or The Rich and the Good as it's known now, Black Friday, Airlines Europe and Arcadia. Tile laying with conflicts inspired by Tigris and Euphrates, that's one of my favourite games. And the fantastical theme would have led me normally to ignore this game, dismissing it as just another Tolkien-esque battler, were it not for the publisher bringing the game to my attention. It's a very unusual game, and I love it for that, even if I struggle to identify an obvious audience for it. Dawn of Ulos clips along at a fair pace, turns are short and full of drama. This is not a game which you're going to play to show off your economic wiles. It's a game to play for the experience and the interaction, laughing at your misfortune and that of your opponents. At the start of a round of My Lil Everdell, players roll dice to generate available resources. Every player then activates all the green production cards in front of them, and then everyone takes turns to place a worker on one of the few locations on the board to perform the associated action, or on an action space from a red card which is already in your display. After placing a worker, you may select a card from below the board and add it to your display, but you must have the resources to pay for it. Blue cards give lasting effects, brown cards activate once when you play them, and purple cards provide endgame scoring objectives. The point-scoring parade tiles are collected as soon as a player achieves the listed requirements, and they decrease in value as players collect them, so you want to get there first. After 4 rounds, the game ends and the highest scorer wins. I probably should have anticipated that this game would exist at some point. The original Everdell is too cute not to receive a junior edition, to capitalise on the kid-friendly aesthetics. My Lil Everdell sits in the same category as My Little Scythe and Agricola Family Edition, a junior edition which is still too complicated for kids to play unless their parents are also at the table. But my intention for the game was not to play with kids. What I really was looking for was Everdell Express, something simple to set up and play without all the faff. Even more essential since I invested in the big box collection, which is so intimidating in its scale, it makes it hard to get it to the table. My Little Everdell delivers the express experience that I was looking for. Even for a group of adults, the gameplay is engaging and rewarding. Though, in my view, a few minor house rules are needed to deepen the experience, just a touch. I predicted sequels to Everdell, other games set in the same universe, and we've had 2 in the last year, this one and Farshore, which I haven't played yet. I'm surprised by how closely Starling Games has stuck to the worker placement formula. I was expecting them to branch off into other genres while retaining the setting. This series definitely still has more to offer. In a round of Medieval Academy, players each have a hand of 5 cards. You select 1 to keep and pass the rest to your neighbour. Then repeat until each player has drafted a hand of 5 cards. You then take turns playing cards from your hand until each player has played 4 times, and the 5th card is discarded. Each time you play a card, you move your token up one of the 7 tracks, which all have their own benefits, mostly revolving around scoring points. The orange kitchen track is the exception. At the end of a round, before scoring the other tracks, the player furthest ahead in the kitchen track advances 3 spaces on any other track, and the second highest player advances 2 spaces, and the third highest advances 1. When you play a yellow card, you can advance on the joust track or on the tournament track, your choice, and both award variable points depending on your position on the track relative to other players at the end of each round. The purple studies track dishes out negative points if you haven't kept up with the other players at the end of each round. And the green king track is only scored in rounds 3 and 6. You simply have to reach one of the milestones to gain 6 or 12 points, but the track resets after round 3, so there's a bit of time pressure to get moving. And the blue town track is only scored at the end of the game, again dishing out negative points to those who have progressed the least. Scores are recorded on cardboard dials, and after 6 rounds, the highest scorer wins. The reverse of the board has a different layout with slightly more complex scoring for the various tracks for advanced players. Now, I purchased the original Medieval Academy back in 2014 at a time when there weren't all that many pick and pass drafting games. 7 Wonders was a huge hit at the time, and Fairy Tale a minor hit before that, but the mechanism hadn't been fully exploited. Sushi Go and Medieval Academy arrived on the market a few months apart, both offering up a massively simplified interpretation of the mechanism. Medieval Academy bungled the landing somewhat. The core gameplay was arguably simpler than Sushi Go. Play cards to climb tracks with various scoring objectives. But the first edition came with a multitude of different game modes and variable board configurations. It had great replayability, but the rulebook and components were intimidating. Of course, Sushi Go garnered massive praise and attention, becoming a best-selling evergreen title, and Medieval Academy was forgotten. So I was delighted to see it return in 2023. This was my most anticipated release at Essenspiel, and this time they've done everything right. The rules are super simple and clear. The artwork was always of a high standard, but this fresh coat of paint is much more modern and appealing. And crucially, we're limited to 2 modes of play, simple and advanced. Revisiting the game, I was reminded just how slight the rule set is. Reading the rules, the game sounds terribly mechanical and procedural, but it comes alive when you play. It's cutthroat, tight, and very interactive. It will be much easier to get this new addition to the table, especially because it has a very simple and engaging new 2-player mode, which works really well. Gigamon is a card-flipping memory game for families. On your turn, you flip 2 tiles face up, and if they're different, you flip them back face down. And if they're the same, you take the tiles and put them in front of you, then use the tiles' power. The effects are a mix of take that and more positive abilities. So when you match 2 Floramons, you can collect a tile from the stack. When you match 2 Pyramons, you can destroy another player's tile. When you match 2 Hydramons, everybody else at the table closes their eyes and you can peek at 4 of the face-down tiles in play. And when you match 2 Aeramons, you can swap one of your tiles with one belonging to another player. When you have 3 identical tiles, you gain the corresponding Gigamon. When the draw pile is empty, the player with the most Gigamons wins the game. You also win instantly if you ever have 3 Gigamons. This is an example of me playing fast and loose with release dates. Gigamon was released first in 2014 by Blue Orange, but I'm allowing it on the list for 3 reasons. Firstly, it was nominated for the Kinderspiel des Jahres in 2023, presumably because it only recently had a German release. And secondly, it only came to my attention late in 2022. And thirdly, it was one of my most played games of the year. Gigamon is the best little memory game that I've played. I know memory mechanisms are an anathema for most strategic gamers, but I really enjoy them, particularly when playing with kids. And the added level here of the chaotic tile abilities is right up my street. I love the immediate feedback of picking a tile and generating a power or reward, stealing a tile from another player, or peeking at the face-down tiles while my opponents look away. The game is fast, funny, and gorgeous to look at. I highly recommend Gigamon for young families, but frankly, I get a kick out of it with any group. In Animals of Baker Street, a group of players take control of a group of animals, a curious mouse who's great at finding stuff, a swift, agile blue tit, a persuasive, charming frog, and a slightly psychopathic tarantula who reportedly arrived in Baker Street in a crate of bananas. The group selects their mission, though generally these are played through in order, then reads the introductory passage from the casebook. There are no real turns in the game, the group simply decides which location to visit and reads the corresponding card. They can then choose to utilise characters, items and information in that location by combining cards and looking to see how the icons line up to determine whether new information is revealed. However, players need to take care because unsuccessful actions frequently cost the group time. There's only so many clock tokens to discard before the mission ends in failure. Animals of Baker Street provided some of the most calm, relaxed and charming gaming moments of the last year. I played through the scenarios with my wife Iris, and there was enough content to keep us involved for a good period of time. The writing really hooked me, with characters that leap off the page. They're distinct and quirky and very funny. This is one of very few games that I've played which genuinely made me laugh out loud, and not once, but frequently. The tarantula's dark view of the world in particular is always entertaining, but the other player characters are equally endearing, and there are a host of non-player characters with their own memorable personalities too. The mechanisms in the game are very slight, there's really not much to it, but the systems that we do have are very clever and intuitive. In Disney Lorcana, players construct their own personal decks before the game begins using cards they've purchased in randomised booster packs. Deck construction is extremely simple. You must have at least 60 cards, and it can only contain 2 of the 6 colours from the game. On your turn, you draw a card, then take as many actions as you can afford. You can add 1 card from your hand to your inkwell, and ink is like energy, which you will use to play other cards. You play cards by exerting cards in your inkwell equal to the cost of the card. And sometimes the inkwell is also used to activate abilities on cards that you've already played. Characters can be placed in front of you, but not used on the same turn. And in future turns, they can be exerted either to gain lore points or to attack an opponent's character. When they've taken enough damage, they're removed from play, and when one player has 20 lore points, they instantly win the game. Of course, cards have a wide variety of special abilities which break the rules in all sorts of creative ways. Now, Disney Lorcana had the traditional bumpy introduction to the world. I'm a total novice when it comes to collectible card games, but it seems to me that they always hit massive problems with distribution, ramping up the demand for the game while also stoking frustration. Lorcana also had a very high-profile lawsuit to contend with, as publishers locked horns over whether this was an original design or a stolen one. I was informed enough to act quickly and snap up a decent little collection of cards in the brief window that they were available and started exploring the game with Iris. Iris enjoys playing games, but prefers to stick to a small number of her favourite titles. She's not a fan of learning new rules, and I've never known her to purchase a game for her own enjoyment. So introducing her to a CCG was a big ask. I knew the Disney theme would be a draw for her. There are 6 different colours, or suits of cards in the game, and each player forms a deck by combining 2 of the colours. So Iris and I took ownership of 3 colours each, giving us options for varying our deck construction between games. So this made opening booster packs exciting, as we divided the cards between us as they were revealed. Iris was very immersed and entertained by the card collecting aspect of the game, but initially less so by the gameplay. The thing is, Lorcana is mean. It is a game of direct attacks. You win by destroying your opponent, and this is completely contrary to Iris's preferred mode of play. It took several games before Iris was happy to accept that her favourite Disney characters were going to be destroyed by my attacks, sometimes just moments after she'd placed them on the table. Nonetheless, she stuck with it, and once we got into the groove, we found the game to be strategic, fast playing with simple rules, and some nice opportunities to pull off combos. It's really satisfying when a plan comes together, and I guess that's what pre-game deck construction is all about. So as much as I've enjoyed Lorcana, for me, it hasn't yet reached the heights of Star Wars Destiny, my one other significant dip into the world of collectible card games. I think that's because Destiny had more of a sense of narrative, though loose, with characters sticking around for longer, and a more coherent logic to the game, assigning items to characters and facing off in a straight-up battle of good versus evil. And I do have a lingering feeling that I might have been better off investing in Disney Villainous expansions, a game which provides much of the fun of head-to-head battle without the in-your-face conflict of a CCG, and a more predictable distribution model. But despite my reservations, Lorcana was a very enjoyable game that we returned to frequently in the second half of 2023, and I'm keen to explore future sets. For now, I'm hooked. Now, I made a similar observation last year, but 2023 did not present me with all that many exciting new gaming experiences. There were some lovely games released, but I do wonder if we're still seeing the after effects of the COVID-19 lockdowns. Game publication generally takes a few years from pitching to release, so many of these titles will have been signed by the publishers shortly before the pandemic and then delayed, or during 2020 or 2021 when everyone was being very cautious, treading water trying to keep their businesses afloat. Nonetheless, if you're looking for something new to try, you couldn't go wrong with any of the titles described in this list. So thank you as always for supporting the channel throughout the year. I'd love to hear your thoughts on my picks and your own favourite games of 2023 in the comments. Until next time, all the best.